Hello and namaste. This is Tim Halloran with a astrology forecast for the Mercury Retrograde in February 2014. So Mercury Retrograde is probably one of the most renowned astrological influences, whether it be with people who are into astrology or not. And so there's a whole lot of information and talk and discussion going on, online everywhere about Mercury Retrograde. And quite frankly, there's a lot that is and isn't true. Or should I say, there's stuff that has greater or less depth to it, So I'm going to be talking about this particular retrograde, but also what the process itself of a retrograde is really all about. Because there is greater depth there than rather it just being a simply mechanical process that therefore only has simply mechanical results, We're dealing with something that has more meaning, greater depth, it's more personal, it's more subjective. It has more to do with the subtle cause of the mechanical stuff. It's not purely mechanical. The mechanical is the result of the spiritual. So astrology is about removing the veil, because it starts with the mechanical, and then removing the veil of the mechanism and getting to what is spiritual, which is very, very subtle. The spiritual world is very, very subtle. You have to be very, very quiet in order to tap into spiritual messages. But the mechanical universe is very gross. It's huge. It's big. And it's, it can be distracting. And this is a part of, the mercy of having free will, is if you don't want to know the cause of the mechanism, you don't have to, because the cause is oftentimes so subtle that if you don't want to pay attention to what is subtle, you don't have to. So the spiritual world is veiled that way. And astrology is about lifting that veil. We're studying the mechanism of the planets, and then we're heading towards and we're getting to the spiritual cause, the intimate, subjective, oftentimes profoundly deep, beautiful, loving truth that is behind the mechanical clock. The mechanism. So I'll get back to retrograde, Mercury retrograde, and what all these, what the function of that is all about. But first, let me begin by talking about this retrograde in, throughout February, which is in Pisces, starts in Pisces and goes through Aquarius. Most of the retrograde is in Aquarius, and then Mercury will be back into Pisces March 17th. So this retrograde now begins today. Mercury is completely stationed right now. He's not moving at about 3 degrees 20 minutes Pisces, which is a degree away from Neptune. So Mercury is in Pisces right now with the king of Pisces, Neptune himself, and this is big deal stuff. Very all-encompassing, powerful, existential. Neptune is a very, very far out, if not the most far out planetary influence. He is God, he's the end, he's death. And this is Pisces energy. So Mercury's in Pisces with Neptune right now. And so we are dreaming real big. We're having real crazy far out dreams. They seem so real, and then when we come back, it seems so far out, We're having excellent time to meditate. This is a perfect time to meditate, with Mercury being still conjunct Neptune. Sit quietly outside, You don't even need to take psychedelics right now. I heard some astrology say about this retrograde. But nonetheless, this retrograde is happening for a reason, and it's going to move back into Aquarius. Mercury's moving back into Aquarius by next week, Wednesday the 12th. He moves back into Aquarius. This is around the same time as a full moon in Leo. And, this has to do with us going back and finding ourselves. Retrograde always has to do with going a little bit more introverted, going inside, going into the past, going into the childhood. And we're doing that because we're finding our role and our passion. And yes, our science, our technical way of doing things is also a part of this retrograde, which is very interesting. Because it begins and ends in Pisces, which is not technical, not defined. Pisces is dissolving, losing all of our boundaries. And it has a tendency to make people feel very uncomfortable in this culture. Very, very, very Pisces people oftentimes get called schizophrenic in this culture. because their nature being so hard to define and melting into everything and losing all definition makes us feel so uncomfortable that we say, well, that's a problem, you know, there's something wrong with you. But this is, you know, they're actually embodying a very crucial part of nature, which is the death and rebirth. But anyways, this retrograde begins there. So it begins with the dream. What do we want in this guy? Our heart, our core, our truth, you know? Something is calling us. It's calling us from really deep. That's why these dreams are so far out. Our subconscious has so many secrets, and we can just barely taste them, but it's beckoning us, you know? Come on back, come on back. And where are we going back? We're going back into Aquarius. Come on back into Aquarius, the scientist, the astrologer. You know, Aquarius is really the most far out science, especially being right here on the cusp. Pisces, Aquarius cusp is where a bunch of planets are residing. The sun's moving out of Aquarius in the next few weeks. It's going to be on this cusp. The age, you know, the big cycle stuff is on the Pisces, Aquarius cusp. You know, that's why it's so insane right now. This is genius. I like to call this cusp the cusp of brilliance. And you could also call it the cusp of insanity, because it's where everything, it's where science meets spirituality. It's where the perfectly defined mechanical process, alchemical nature gets merged and dissolves with the irrational, the beyond. So Mercury's moving back into Aquarius, going through this cusp, you know, and it has to do with our role in society. What is my alchemy? You know, I have this goal, this dream that beckons from real deep within me. It's the spiritual world. The spiritual sky beckons. And how do I do my spiritual work in the world is alchemy. Alchemy is taking spirit and moving it into the world. That's what we're figuring out in the month of February, summed up. And yeah, it's really interesting because this retrograde really begins and ends with Neptune. And then partway through the process, we got Saturn thrown in the mix. Wednesday, the 19th, will be the first time that Mercury squares Saturn in February. And then, coming out of the retrograde, March 10th, he'll square Saturn a second time. And this Mercury square Saturn can be frustration, can be earthly, technical challenges that are looking to be overcome. We have spiritual work that we desire. It just beckons to us. It doesn't necessarily have the alchemical, functional, practical process down yet. And we're looking to discover and work through how to do this very difficult to define spiritual beckoning in a body, in the world, in this very defined, almost prison-like sometimes, mechanical nature. How is it that we can be in both at the same time? Is what this Mercury retrograde could be on its deepest root level, be, you know, the challenge that is desiring to be overcome. And a Mercury square Saturn is a challenge that is desiring to be overcome. It doesn't always come easy. And just because we say, oh, well, the mechanical process says there's going to be a Mercury retrograde, that means problems, and there's going to be a Mercury square Saturn, that means problems, that it's all about the problems. Because the problems are there for a different reason. So let's talk about Mercury retrograde as a process. You know, it obviously gets very defined as, well, it's technological breakdown, it's communication breakdown. You know, it's when things go haywire. And I'm not going to say that that's not true, because I'm a computer animator, I'm on the computer all the time, and oh yeah, this stuff does happen. So I might as well throw to you the shadow days, because here's the other thing. A lot of astrologers are just like, oh my gosh, don't plan anything during a Mercury retrograde, don't use technology, don't try, you know, scheduling. And you know, a Mercury retrograde happens like 3 times throughout a year, and if you consider the shadow phase to be a part of that retrograde, that's literally like 1/3 of the year being under the influence of Mercury retrograde. So you can't just not do anything during a Mercury retrograde. But I'm going to give you some dates where Mercury is in his shadow, which means this is when Mercury is either slowing down, speeding up, changing directions, and this is when things are a little bit more awry and, you know, easier to get off of one track and jump onto another, which is, again, not a problem. Jumping off of one track onto another is not a problem. It's just that we are more susceptible to be a little bit more confused and thrown off. So the shadow dates is today through the 10th is the first, when Mercury's turning retrograde, picking up speed, going backwards. And then at the end of the month, the 25th through really the 4th of March is when Mercury's turning direct, slowing down, then moving forward again. These are the times that we might want to be extra aware. We do not want to update the computers during those days. I can tell you because of experience. You know, we might see technology take on a mind of its own. That's totally possible. I mean, Mercury rules all of these things, and Mercury is actually a really far out, deep, fundamental spiritual thing. Cause, function. It's not a mechanical function. So the reason all these mechanical things are going haywire is still a spiritual cause. Technology is not dead, you see. Computers aren't even really dead. There's still life, there's still consciousness. It's just too weird for us to possibly understand. But Mercury retrograde is sort of initiating us a little more into that understanding, because we're seeing how these things flux and how it's not so black and white and simple. Even the technology that we think we're inventing, entering this age of Aquarius, is still so much more far out than we are currently able to see. But, you know, this Pisces-Aquarius cusp, it's the mechanical Saturn-Neptune. It's the mechanical versus the spiritual. What is it? Is this a mechanical universe, or is it a spiritual universe? Is it either or? And it's both. You know, it's music. This is Rasa Leela healing. I look at everything being a dance. Yeah, Rasa means aesthetic, flavor, beauty. Leela is a dance. Everything is our Rasa Leela. Everything is a reflection of the Rasa Leela. Everything is actually music. The sound of the spheres, it's music, it's beauty being expressed. But can you look at musical from a mechanical point of view? Can you take music and break it down into music notes and different refrains and all this? Absolutely. So it's both. And you can look at it from either side, and you can use one side to get to the other. So Mercury retrograde being a mechanical process, it's in service to the music. It's just change of tempo. It's just, now we're going to move this way. Now we're being called within. Go back into the past. Go back into the childhood. Go into your dreams. You know? It's still about connecting with your mind. It's now showing you the side of your mind that we're not so much used to, which is that mind still being the dualistic, mechanical, rational function is still in service to the irrational, beyond all conception aspect of life. Mercury is Hermes. Hermes is the messenger. The messenger of who? God. Mercury goes into the spiritual world and then brings it back to the mechanical world. This is what we're doing in this Mercury retrograde, you know? And I've heard some astrologers say, well, when a planet goes retrograde, it becomes weaker. And this is like saying that introverted people are weaker than extroverted people. It's just plain not true. Introverted people are stronger than extroverted people at the inside. But because we're so used to only seeing the outside, and our culture is obviously very focused extrovertedly, we've lost a lot of spiritual understanding through the last age. We say that they're weaker. You know, introverted people are just wasting all their time, right? But no, it's not like that. Venus was just retrograde. It was about going inside with relationships. It wasn't that relationships got weaker. Venus did not feel weaker during the retrograde. Mercury's not going to feel weaker during this retrograde. And when this Mercury retrograde finishes, there's going to be a Mars retrograde. We're going to be going inside, figuring out our will and our roles more. And this is not saying it's going to be weaker. Actually, the retrograde is about making it stronger. It's about finding its root core purpose. So let's go inside and figure out how we can use this mind to serve this alchemical spiritual work, how to do spiritual work in the mechanical world, what we are going to practically and functionally do to help other people to spread love and beauty and things that are so deep that they go beyond. And that's what this alchemical process is about. You create a black hole, a portal that leads to a different dimension. That's alchemy. So we're figuring out how to do this, during this month. It has a lot to do with coming into our role, expression, communicating, using this throat chakra. It's all interrelated. It's all very, very deep and very, very beautiful. So learn to use this guy, learn to use this guy. Be introverted. You don't have to form so many practical plans, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing. Allow yourself to drift for a little bit. And when it goes into this, Mercury square Saturn, we're facing, the mental frustrations, the challenges, the depressions. We can know those things to be what is motivating us to get even deeper with what our minds are doing in service to us, in service to our spiritual role. Mercury used to be all important in old astrology, and now we're saying that Mercury is not so important, because we're saying, oh, the rational mind is dualistic. It keeps us separate from God and spirit, and so we need to kill it. We need to kill Mercury, and we need to kill the mind. And that's obviously a misconception. Mercury, Hermes, is in service to the sun, and he's the closest one to the sun, actually, for a reason, because he's the messenger. He goes to the sun, to the spiritual world, and brings it down to this one. So if you have any questions about how this Mercury retrograde is going to be affecting you personally through the month of February into March, you can click the link below and I can look at your personal transits. And otherwise, I will be talking to you shortly with the weekly astrology. Wishing you the best. Enjoy this Pisces Aquarius. Get far out. Have fun with it. Don't be afraid. Don't be intimidated. It has a lot to do with trust. Trust yourself. There's a lot of beauty waiting on the other end. Namaste.